Okay. So let's continue the class. We have some fundamental rights and obligations we're going to check here. Non-discrimination. Do you understand discrimination? Can you give me some examples of discrimination?
Discrimination of gypsies.
Women and men?
Discrimination of gypsies.
Gypsies. Yeah, discrimination against gypsies is a problem in Ireland.
And in
everywhere.
our country.
In some European countries, yes. In France they have a problem as well. Any other kind of discrimination?
Racism.
Racism. Anything else?
Oh, women. Just women.
So somebody said men and women, right? Anything else? Okay, so this is a fundamental. It means that if we have a choice between two stakeholders, right, and one of them involves our owners who want more profit, so they say you're running a factory, and they say, why don't we pay the workers from Cambodia or Vietnam a lower salary? Then we can make more profit, right?
Yes.
Anyway, those workers earn a very low salary in Cambodia or Vietnam, and they don't speak Korean as well as Korean workers do. So let's pay them a lower salary to make more profit, right? So if we take this as non-discrimination, then non-discrimination is a fundamental right. Okay, so we can't. Fundamental means it's a very important one. So we can't pay the Korean workers higher than the Vietnamese workers. Okay, we have to not to discriminate, right? Or the same if we have a woman and a man who's doing the same job. We can't say that the man should get paid more than the woman. Okay, so the company should be clear on that area. Okay, so this is a right and obligation that the company has.
So so to achieve non-discrimination, do we have to pay equally with the Cambodian and Korean?
Yes.
Wow, that's wrong.
Why is it wrong?
I don't know.
Huh? If you're paying them differently, why are you paying them differently? Because one is Cambodian and one is Korean. Isn't that discrimination?
So what about the strategy of operating business?
But I mean in Korea, if they're working in Korea, in the same factory doing the same job in Korea. But if you set up a factory in Cambodia, then you can pay a lower wage because the cost of living is lower in Cambodia, right? So it's a different kind of thing. But I'm talking about in Korea. But you make an interesting point, is that is it the right thing for companies if they're manufacturing in the US and manufacturing in Vietnam to pay the US worker higher price than the Cambodian worker? Of course the cost of living is different, right? But it may be that the salary is still too different, right? So what about physical security? So it's like you shouldn't get attacked, right? That kind of thing. If we were working in the Middle East or some area where we have some war at the moment, the company has to pay the money to protect you. They can't just leave you there without proper protection. Okay? Or if you're, for some reason, you could be attacked or hurt, the company has to make sure you're safe. Freedom of speech. So everybody in the company should be allowed to say what shouldn't be punished for saying something, right? Political participation. Everybody should be allowed to vote for whoever they want, right? And you shouldn't be bullied by your work to vote for one person or another person, or even shouldn't be tried to be persuaded one way or another. Okay? Subsistence. So the minimum wage that we pay to people, if we are working in Vietnam or Cambodia, the wage that we give to the people has to be a subsistence wage. We can't give them lower than the money they need to pay for housing and clothes and food. Right? You can see that sometimes in some countries, that even though people are working, they might just be earning $1 or less than $1 a day. So it's not enough to pay for their housing and so on. So this is a fundamental right which companies should keep. Okay? Then derivative. Derivative means based on. In finance we have derivatives. Derivative is a contract based on another contract. So in finance we have a future contract for oil. I'll buy oil from you next year. Airline companies often use future contracts for oil. Okay? Then a derivative contract is an option contract. Option contract is I pay some premium to have the option of buying oil from you next year. So I can choose to buy oil from you at this price next year or not. But I have to pay a premium for that. That is called a derivative contract. Contract based on another contract. Okay? So derivative rights is a right based on another right. Not as important as a fundamental right. So they depend on their importance on an instrumental contribution towards achieving some other goal. So not legally or practically essential for individual integrity and may be infringed upon if they conflict with other rights. So it's easier to understand if we look at an example. So a derivative right is privacy. So I said to you, you shouldn't look at my email, right? That's a privacy right, okay? But now, if I come into the room with blood on my hands, right? Somebody is dead in the other room. Do you think it's okay to look at my email now? Or not? Yes, right? Because it's more important to find the information. Did I kill that person or not? So you can look at my email. So the police can look at your emails. You have a privacy right, but if you're a suspect in a crime, the police can look at your emails. Why? Because the fundamental right, the person died, is more important than your derivative right of privacy. Okay? So another example here is doctor and patient. So if they're going to prevent a crime, or they can stop this privacy law. So the doctor shouldn't say that the patient has some problem, but the patient has a psychological problem, right? They think they're Batman or something like that, right? And they say that they have to kill all the bad guys. So tonight the doctor thinks maybe he's going to go out and try and kill some criminals tonight. So the doctor is going to tell the police, okay? So he's not, the patient has the right to privacy. The doctor shouldn't tell anybody about their psychological problems, right? But if the doctor thinks there's going to be a crime, then they have to decide which right is more important, fundamental right or derivative right. This is why we have search warrants in the police. Do you understand search warrant? Normally nobody can come into your house unless you ask them to come into your house. You have the right of privacy in your own house, okay? And you have kind of property right. You own the house, okay? But the police can make a search warrant, a paper which says the police can come into your house to investigate a crime. So it's similar again, the fundamental right is more important. So how is this relevant to the business? An employee's privacy might be infringed upon if the private information is relevant to their job performance. So, do you know Steve Jobs?
Yes.
So he's dead now, right? He passed away. He had a very serious illness, but he didn't tell the company about it for a long time. What do you think? Do you think Steve Jobs should have told the company as soon as he knew about his illness, which was very serious, or he didn't need to tell the company?
You don't need to with his private life.
Think that's his
In
private
my
life?
opinion.
But I think he should have told to the shareholders at least.
Yes. You should tell the
Also the
shareholders,
board.
the owners of the company. Why?
Because they're involved, so they are the closest involved people there, so
Okay.
they should know that.
So
Or
gender-
maybe they shouldn't know, like, I have this disease or stuff like that, but they should know, like, I might end up in this company, quit my job soon because of something.
Okay, so if you have some medical problem, you don't need to tell the company, right? Like you said, but if it's a serious one, like you're going to die, and it gets to the point where it's very serious, and you can see you're going to die, right? It's called a terminal illness, right? Terminal means ending. Then you you have to, your privacy is could be less important than the rights of the shareholders, okay? So at some point, Steve Jobs eventually told the shareholders, right? Told the public and told the company about his disease. So we have to find that there's a right point where the private information is relevant to the job performance, okay? I have some illness in my leg, but it doesn't affect my job. Do I need to say anything? No, right? But I'm going blind slowly. I have some disease that makes me go blind slowly. And my job is, I'm a soccer referee. I referee the soccer game. I'm Shinpan. Should I tell my employers? Should I tell FIFA?
Of course not.
Okay, so we have to find out the right balance. So let's discuss these questions with your partner. So it helps if you have printed out the PPT, right? On the website. Look at the website. Here we have all the PPT files. Right? It will be changed slightly, but you can print out all of the PPT. Put on 6 slides on one page, right? And then print it out. Then it's like a note or a book you can use in the notes you can use for help you to answering the questions in the class time, right? Otherwise, you have to take notes yourself. Is also a good idea to write down. If you write down yourself, you remember more. Okay. Or let's just try to remember.
Tak jakoś zapłacić
Where is the attendance list? Did everybody check their names?
No.
No, we didn't.
Your names out. Somebody else checked your name. Somebody checked all the names. Yes, must be it. There's one student missing. 2, 4, 6, 8, 14, 16, 18, 19.
No.
We'll discuss all of the questions. We'll discuss the other questions too.
그 외국인하고 너희 팀 자체가 아닌 것 같은데 너 이름이 조가 4조는 짜준 거 보면은 이름 아까 적혀 있잖아. 누구랑 짜준지 알아? 그렇지. 그러니까 이걸 어떻게 해야 되지? 난 외국인
Ale bardzo chodzi the difference between legal rights
그러니까 내 생각에 교수님이 남자 여자라 가지고 그냥 그렇게 싸도 짜줄 것 같은 생각이 드는데
몇 팀이신데요?
한 팀. 그런데 두 가지가 3팀이 얘고 그다음 4팀 여자니까 저 여자 저 중국인 포함해서 여자인 거고 그런 의미인 것 같은데 지금.
protect legal are for everyone for us.
외국인 하고 싶은 거.
아니 난 필요는 없는데 지금 짜져 있어가지고 이거를 뭐 어떻게
그래서
설명해?
이따가 맨날
Korean workers they don't protect like standards with health, like factories in China.
얘는 도덕적인 거 약간 양심 문제가
Okay, so then let's discuss the questions. So, Wang Shui-ju, what are a manager's fiduciary obligations to a shareholder? The first question. Do you know the answer? Okay, Kim Soo-in, first question. What does fiduciary mean? Easier word for fiduciary. Okay, so don't lie to the shareholders. So trust is an easier word we can use, right? Like trust obligations, right? So don't lie. What else? What else is the kind of trust obligation? Report truthfully, right? Don't try to deceive. Don't say bad things about the company. Okay, those kind of things. So the next question, Choi Mi-so. Can you answer the next question? Give an example of how managers only thinking about increasing the stock price might infringe on somebody's fundamental rights. So the managers are only thinking about profit or increasing the stock price.
Nike, Indonesia factory, hire young children.
Okay, so Nike's Indonesian factory can hire young kids. Then they're infringing on the right of the kids, right?
Yes.
Or that there shouldn't be any underage labor. Okay, so the third question. What is the difference between legal rights and professional rights? Jung Ji-hyun.
아까도 축구 선수 보여줘. 낚시한 사람이지.
Based on existing laws, minimal obligations like civil rights
Yes.
and professional rights is view of expressed in the field about how professionals should act.
Yes, okay. So could you give an example of a legal right and a professional right? What is an example of a legal right?
그냥 거기 속도제 스피드 리미트 스피드 리미트 카 스피드 리미트.
Okay, yes, you need to keep if your driver is working for your company, they have to keep the speed limit when they're driving, right? What about a professional right?
Sports players have to act in a certain way, professional way.
Okay, so sports players especially can't give bad example at kids, right? And then the last one, what is the difference between a fundamental and derivative right? John Ji Young.
Fundamental rights protect human rights and contracts.
Derivative right?
Right.
Derivative.
Secondary for fundamental rights.
Okay, it's not as important as fundamental right. So what example of derivative right did we look at in the class?
As you said, doctor.
The doctor's privacy, right?
Privacy.
So we can look at some more
기반.
examples. So here we listed some fundamental rights. And here we can see negative obligation and positive obligation. So negative obligation means to refrain from depriving. Okay? So don't do something. Positive obligation means I need to do something. Do you understand the difference? Negative and positive obligation or duty? So fundamental rights, freedom of physical movement, ownership of property. Do I need to do something to make sure that people can move around, go wherever they want? Not really, right? Just I shouldn't deprive them. I shouldn't tell them, you're not allowed to leave the country. Okay? So that's something I shouldn't do. I shouldn't try to stop them from leaving the country or leaving the city. In the Middle East we have some problem. The labour law is very weak where, for example, in Qatar they take the passports of the foreign workers from Indonesia or Malaysia, right? So can the Indonesian or Malaysian workers leave the country? No, they can't. The boss of the company has their passport. Okay? So that's, company shouldn't be doing that. Okay? So that's negative obligation. Don't take their passport. Okay? Don't block them from leaving. Okay? Ownership of property, freedom from torture. Again, things that companies shouldn't take away your property or torture you. Right? It's not something they have to do. It's something they shouldn't do or mustn't do. Okay? Fair trial, non-discrimination. They need to do something. Non-discrimination. What kind of duty do you think a company has to make sure that there is no discrimination in the workplace? What kind of positive obligation do they have to protect people? They have to do something to make sure people are protected. What kind of thing would the company have to do to make sure that people are protected? That there is no discrimination. For example, against women. In this case, the company shouldn't just do nothing. The company has to do something. So what should the company do to make sure there is no discrimination against women in the company? For example, if we look at our company and we see in the senior management there is 90% men and 10% women, right? Yes, then what should we do?
Hire more women.
Hire more women. So, right, we can make this idea, but what action are we going to take to make sure that we're hiring more women? We could tell the person who's doing the interview, just generally, hire more women, right? But it's not a very specific action. So what kind of action can we take to make sure we're hiring more women?
Workplace like woman. Woman like.
Woman-friendly workplace?
Woman-friendly workplace.
But my question is, what are we going to do? What action are we going to do to hire more women or have a woman-friendly workplace? What action does the manager need to take?
Find what women can do in the company.
Okay, find out what women can do. Right? What can we do? What action? I'm talking about putting in a process or a system in place. Kind of system or process.
There can be those simple quotas, or how you call it, where there's like 50% men,
Yes.
50% women.
So we could make a quota. This has been used in the US for race also. Have you watched the movie Crash?
Yes.
Yes, in the movie Crash, the guy is talking to a black African-American woman on the phone, right? And he says, you only got your job because you're African-American, right? The reason is they had some quota in the US. They have to hire 10% African-Americans, right? Do you understand quota?
Yes.
So he says that sometimes the more qualified person might not get the job. So in Ireland, universities often have that kind of quota, okay? So the university has to promote not just the men to the head of department, but the women. So the head of department, 30% should be women. So you can find some case where men will complain, hey, I'm better qualified than her. Why is she getting the job, right? So quotas is one way to deal, but it's not a perfect way, right? But people will say in the long term it's okay, because then in the if women never get the chance, then how are they ever going to be better qualified if you never give them a promotion, right? So in the long term, you give the promotion, then she can move up to the next level and the next level, right? So we can see in Norway and Sweden they're the most progressive on this front. In companies, there's a law in Norway which says that on this top senior level there has to be 20 or 30%, I'm not sure exactly, women have to be at the top level in the company, okay? According to the law. And the board of directors, which supervise the company, should be 20 or 30% women. We can see political parties also have the same idea. they say the next election, 40% of our candidates have to be women, 60% have to be men. Okay, so quota seems to be one of the most general ways of dealing with the discrimination, right? But we can just put systems and processes in place. Also, a good system or process is if somebody has a complaint, it's easy for them to complain. So a woman feels she's been discriminated against because she's a woman, or a foreigner feels they've been discriminated against because of their race, then they should be able to have some system where they can complain easily, or make a complaint formally, and it's dealt with in the right way. So if we make those kind of systems, so in this case we have an obligation to do some positive action, right? We need to say that, make some quota in our company, or make some complaint system, so if there is discrimination, people can complain easily. Okay, freedom of speech and association. Okay, what could be a positive obligation? Here, association means that we can make groups, like for example, trade union or workers' union. Korea's labor law is quite poor in this way. Korea is a developed country, but it developed very quickly. So some parts of Korean society are less developed. The economy developed very quickly, but the law didn't develop as quickly. So also the IMF didn't help when they came in 1997, right, with the labor law. So Korea's labor law is not very strong. So in Korea, also in the US, the labor law is not very strong. Europe has a very strong labor law. Do you understand the labor law?
Yes.
No don bop.
Yes.
So what can we do to make sure that our employees have freedom of speech and association? They can join some union if they want. Do you understand union?
Yes.
Hobby or something like that. So what's a positive first of all, we should not tell them, hey, you're not allowed to join the union. If you join the union, you're going to get fired, right? We shouldn't tell them that. Okay? What? Or if you say something, if you talk to this newspaper or you say something, you're going to get fired. That's a negative obligation. But what's a positive obligation? What should a company do? What kind of duty or obligation do they have?
이게 노동 조합을 구했는데 기업이 무슨 도움을 주는 거예요? 무슨 도움을 줘야 돼요?
So the company can just, again, make some policy or system inside their company. Again, people can complain, say anything they want. Some system where people can, instead of complaining outside, they can make a system so they can communicate their problem inside the company very well, right? And also they can, when people join the company, they can let them know that these people are in this kind of union, right? Give them the information. This is the union that people are in. So we can make some systems. Minimal education. What's a positive obligation for minimal education? Company can do.
Parents, child must go to low. Parents, 부모가 애들을 무조건 의무 시켜.
They can help the parents maybe to send their kids to school, right? Or they can make a program where you get some support for sending your kids to the school or so on. Or they can make sure the workers themselves, if they sometimes in the factory they can't read, right? So they should make a reading program, for example. In some countries people are illiterate. Then political participation. Again, we can see here positive obligation for political participation. So the company again can make some system where people are encouraged to vote and encouraged to participate in politics, right?
Yes.
And in government. Maybe they could make some link with the local government and the government can ask the company about policy, right? They can make a certain department which coordinates with the government about policy. For example, we're a bank. We can help the government to make policy about finance and so on. And then subsistence. So how can we make sure that all our workers have enough money to pay for their rent and food and clothes? What do we need? What does the company need to do? What action? What action do we need to take? A negative one, don't pay them too low salary, right?
Yes.
What's the positive one that we need to do?
Make boundary of lowest wage.
Okay, so we can look at make a minimum wage for the company based on the cost of living, right? Check about the cost of living and make a minimum wage. It might be higher than the legal minimum wage. In some countries the legal minimum wage is very low, right? Like less than $1 a day. So so here we just talk about, we just looked at there, but we'll sum up again. Negative and positive duties. So some forms of respecting rights involve action, others inaction. Okay. Negative duties, for example, not censoring a movie, respecting people's freedom of speech. Positive action duties, action to support somebody whose rights are being violated. So it's like if you're on the street, right? Negative obligation, don't punch somebody. Okay? Positive obligation, you see somebody getting punched, right? You should help them, right? If you can. If they're not being punched by 5 or 6 guys and you're by yourself, then you can't really help them, right? But if they're being punched by one person and you're 3 or 4, then do you think you have an obligation or duty to help the person or not?
No.
You don't think so? Does anybody think you do?
It wasn't
You see somebody getting hit on the street. It's illegal to punch somebody. You are 3 or 4 people together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys, right? You see me punching him at the back. What are you do you have a positive obligation to help him or not? There's 5 of you, there's just 1 of me. What do you think?
We'll join you.
Join me?
Yeah.
Why? You like superhero movies. Do you think I have a positive obligation to help?
Yes.
Yes. Why? How about if there's just 1 of you? You have a car which is like a bat, but the whole city is full of criminals. Do you have a positive obligation to help all the city?
Yes.
Okay. So Batman is a very positive obligation person, right? He's going to go and help everybody. So here we can see the example, security forces. So we have a march where some people want to have a demonstration, right, against something. And then some other people come to the march and start to attack them. Then the security force has to help them to demonstrate. Okay, we can't, if we allow this kind of thing, then we're going to end up with somebody like Hitler in power. This is one of the ways that Hitler got to power. He figured out how to get to power. One of the ways was, anytime anybody had a demonstration or a march, he would send his private army to attack them. Right? And then break up the march or break up the demonstration. So the other political parties were afraid. Right? They were afraid to have the speech in public, or they were afraid to do anything, because Hitler's private army, the SS, could come and attack them. This is even before he was elected. They were like violent thugs, right? So the security force, the police and the army should come in and protect people who are having some demonstration. So what about in business? With our stakeholders, we have negative and positive, fundamental and derivative rights and duties. So we talked about here, one thing is systems, policies and procedures. So companies have to make sure we have the right policy, the right program, the right procedure, the right system to protect against discrimination, so it doesn't happen. One very simple policy, when we interview somebody, usually we have 3 people interviewing. At least one of them should be a woman, right? So that's a simple policy that most companies have. If you're being interviewed by 3 men, then it's not a good sign, right? Especially if you're a woman being interviewed by 3 men, it's not a good sign. It means that the company should have a better policy. They should always have at least 1 woman on the interview board, so that as a woman, you're going to get at least, it's just avoiding discrimination, right? It's avoiding that the 3 men start to talk about football with the guy who was just before you, right? And then they're all laughing and yes, okay, then let's hire him, right? Avoiding that kind of problem. So we need to start these kind of policies. So what about the derivative right to privacy? So the HR department should make sure that your private information is properly protected, right? Maybe use the right IT security program so it can't be hacked. Don't leave the documents lying around. That kind of policy. So the obligation to protect the environment is another example of a derivative obligation. It's not a fundamental human right, but it's something which is still important. But it's something which can be sacrificed if we have to clash. So positive obligation, we should engage in sustainable business practices. We'll talk about more later in the course. So there is also this called special obligations. Do you understand special?
Yes.
Yes, so special means in unusual case, right? Or here we have a high degree of vulnerability and dependence. An example is a child and a parent, client and a lawyer, a policeman and the victim of a crime. Can you understand vulnerability and dependence? If I'm a child, I depend on my parents, right? If I'm a client, I don't understand about the law very well, okay? So this is a problem with lawyers. One of the reasons people don't like lawyers is it might be a very simple thing, but the lawyer tells me, oh, that's very complicated, that's going to take a lot of time, oh, I think that will take 100 hours, right? Do you know how long it's going to take? No, you have no idea, you're not a lawyer, right? So you're vulnerable. Do you understand vulnerable? Vulnerable means you can be taken advantage of. Okay? So for example, an example of vulnerable is a deer which is in the middle of a field, right? It's vulnerable, easily can be attacked by wolves, right? So the victim and the police, right? The victim is depending on the police to find the answer. So this is a kind of special relationship. The person who's needy can be open for opportunistic exploitation. Another simple example could be a foreigner and a taxi driver. I get to the airport in Korea. I ask the taxi driver, how much does it cost to go to the city centre? Right? I'm the needy party. I need the taxi. It's late at night. Right? But taxi driver can exploit me. Exploit means take advantage of. He can tell me, oh yes, that's Ishipman one, right? To Seoul city centre, okay? So, that kind of relationship. So the benefactors take on special obligations to protect the well-being of the subordinate. So the point is that in the case where you're the company and they have a very weak position inside your company, right? Or you're the parent and the child, or the lawyer and the client, doctor and patient, policeman and victim. In this case you have an even stronger obligation, right? Special obligation to protect that person. So lawyers would have a code of conduct. We talked about professional code, right? They have a code of conduct that they should follow. So they shouldn't overcharge and so on. So in business, what kind of special obligations do we have? Shareholders are in a bit of a weak position. Okay, they're not following the day-to-day business. So they rely on the manager. The manager has all the financial information. Okay, he has all the accounts. He has all the reports. So their managers can exploit their trust. So we saw in the case of Enron, okay, and in the Wall Street banks in the financial crisis, like Lehman Brothers, where the managers can get big bonuses by taking big risks or by being deceitful or by being greedy, right? And the shareholders don't know, right? They don't know. They're not following the business every day. So the managers have an obligation here to the shareholders, okay? They have this fiduciary responsibility to promote the success of the company, even if it means they cannot make a comprehensive environmentally sustainable business plan. So sometimes they have to sacrifice this. They want to give money to charity or make this company into the best sustainable company in the world, right? But the shareholders are in a weak position. They don't know all the information. So the managers have to keep this fiduciary responsibility or trust that the shareholders gave them to also make a successful company. Because in the worst extreme example here, if we look at the neoclassical way of thinking, I'm a really nice person, I make the best environmental sustainable plan, I give a lot of money to charity as a manager, but the company starts losing money and then it goes bankrupt, right? So everybody loses their job, okay? The shareholders lose all the money, the customers don't get the product, the suppliers lose their business, okay? So in the end, it could be a worse off situation for everybody. So we have to make some. First, the manager has to know which is which, right? Which is derivative and which is primary. So first of all, they have to follow the fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders and make a profit, make a successful company. If they don't make a successful company, it's going to be bankrupt. Okay? Then after they make a successful company, they can start to do the environmentally sustainable plan well. Okay? So we have some desperate employees. So if I talk to you about Vietnamese or Cambodian workers in Korea, they could be in kind of a desperate situation. Just their visa was sponsored by the company. Okay? Korea has some special workers visa for labor workers in the factory. But if they lose their job, they have to go back to Vietnam or Cambodia, right? Maybe their family is dependent on them for the income. So they're kind of in a difficult situation. So the company shouldn't take advantage of that situation by paying them a lower wage or treating them differently, right? Because the company knows that I can pay you a lower wage and you're not going to leave me. That's taking advantage. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So this is kind of special obligation, okay? Vulnerability of trusting consumers. So again, if our consumers trust our company, in China we had a serious problem where the milk had some dangerous chemical, right? Because it was cheaper. So our consumers are trusting us to give them the product in a healthy and safe way. So they're kind of vulnerable. They trust us to make the milk properly. So we have a special obligation here too. If we are making some product which can damage people's health. So the time is finished for today. So actually I didn't see the time, but you can see who's in your group. Maybe if you have time, you can talk to them. So can you just put up your hand? I'm going to call the roll so people can see you and who's in your group. So Im Tae-kyun. Im Tae-kyun is group 3, yes?
We have a question. We already decided the team member. Should we change?
No, it's too late now. You should have told me before the break time. If I have to change now, I have to mix the people around and they already know their group. Okay? So I said I gave you 2 chances to make the group, so now I already made the group. Okay, so Kim Soo-in, Kim Hwee-jin,
Yes.
Lee Hyuk-jae, Im Jae-hong, Kim Da-kyung, Hwang Esther, Kim Sang-hwee, Yang Sung-won, Victoria, or Veronica, sorry.
But I don't understand how this
Yeah,
works.
it's like in the group or.
No, I'm just calling the attendance, but just you can see who's in your.
Attendance. Ah, okay.
Some people don't know who's in their group, so you just watch. If you don't know the name, listen to the name and look at the person. Okay, Martin, Nam Gong Chan, not here today. Yang Hyung Suk, Lee Ji Soo, Lee Jin Young, Lee Chang Hui,
Yep.
Chong Jin Young, Jung Ji Young, Choi Mi So, Wang Shui Ju. So you should know who's in your group, okay?
너 가서 얘기 좀 해줘. 다음에 만나서 얘기해. 아, 방. 말씀해줘. 아, 여기 말고 외국인도 있잖아. 외국인 말씀해줘.